Blake Hensley had been the undisputed king of Ridgeview Motors for almost a decade. His name was on every leaderboard, his face in every photo that hung behind the glass trophy case. He was the man who could sell a luxury car to anyone and make them believe it was their idea. That Monday morning, he strolled through the dealership with his usual swagger. A fresh latte in one hand, his Rolex catching the light from the showroom. Every step said, "I own this place." But as he entered, the mood felt different. The usual laughter, the background chatter, it was quieter. People were whispering, glancing toward the conference room with mixed expressions. He frowned. "What's with the funeral faces?" He muttered to the receptionist. "New general manager coming in today," she said, lowering her voice. "They say she's different." Blake smirked. "Different? Let me guess, corporate type, doesn't know how this business runs." Inside the glass-walled room, the team was already gathered. Greg Turner, the regional director, stood at the front. Next to him stood a woman in a navy suit, confident posture, eyes sharp, presence calm but commanding. "This is Ms. Camille Torrance," Greg announced. "She's joining us from Charlotte. Under her leadership, her last team hit record sales." Polite applause filled the air. Blake clapped once, slowly, leaning back in his chair. "Great," he thought. Another outsider with a PowerPoint. Camille smiled, unfazed. "Thank you, Greg. My goal isn't just numbers. It's trust. People don't just buy cars, they buy confidence." Blake whispered to the man beside him, "Confidence, huh? Cute speech." A few muffled laughs followed. Camille kept going, unshaken. Luxury is about experience. How a client feels from the first handshake to the last key handoff. That's when Blake leaned forward, voice dripping arrogance. "With all due respect, ma'am," he interrupted. "This is a man's business. You probably don't get how this works." The room froze. Coffee cups stopped mid-air. Even the clock seemed to hold its breath. Camille looked straight at him. No anger. No raised voice. "Thank you for your input, Mr. Hensley. We'll revisit perspectives later. For now, let's stay focused." Then she continued her presentation. Smooth, calm, unbothered. Everyone exhaled quietly, but Blake's grin faded. He didn't realize it yet, but that moment, one careless comment, had just started the chain reaction that would unravel everything he'd built. By the end of her first week, Camille Torrance had already changed the rhythm of Ridgeview Motors. The dealership that once ran on ego and adrenaline was suddenly quieter, more precise. Every meeting started on time, every report was double-checked, and every deal went through her desk before approval. For most of the salesmen, that wasn't a big deal. They were used to structure. But for Blake Hensley, the self-proclaimed king of sales, it was an insult. He'd built his reputation on charm, quick talk, and instinct. Paperwork was for amateurs. Schedules were for people who didn't have talent. And now, this new manager, this woman, was putting rules on his empire. That Friday, the tension boiled over. Blake leaned against a new BMW, flashing his trademark smile at a couple inspecting the vehicle. He spoke softly, confidently. "I'll tell you a secret. I could sell this car to you for 10 grand less, but you'd still thank me for the price I quote." The couple laughed. They were hooked. Just then, Camille walked by. "Mr. Hensley," she said evenly, "did you include the new tax adjustment in that quote?" He froze. "I was getting to that." "Good," she said, smiling politely. "Transparency first, always. Customers respect that." Then she walked away. No argument, no lecture. But to Blake, it felt like humiliation. The couple noticed too. The confidence in the air faded, replaced by awkward silence. For the first time in years, he lost a deal. Later, in the break room, he slammed his coffee cup on the counter. "She's ruining the way I work," he said to Rico, a younger salesman who idolized him. "She's trying to make us all into little robots. This isn't accounting, it's sales." Rico hesitated. "She's strict, yeah, but she knows her stuff. Yesterday, she helped me close a deal that was stuck for weeks." Blake scoffed. "She's lucky corporate sent her. If it were up to me, she'd be gone by now." But deep down, something was gnawing at him. Camille wasn't just managing, she was winning. The numbers were already climbing. Clients loved the smoother process. And worst of all, the staff respected her. Even the service guys, the ones who barely nodded at management, started greeting her by name. By week 3, it was clear. The king had competition. Monday morning arrived with a new sales challenge. Whoever closed the highest value in a single day would win a weekend trip to Miami. All expenses paid. A whole team buzzed with excitement. Blake saw his chance to reclaim the spotlight. "This is it," he muttered, straightening his tie. Back to the throne. From her office, Camille watched as the floor came alive. Phones ringing, deals firing off, confidence everywhere. But she knew one thing about Blake. When he wanted to win, he cut corners. By noon, he had 3 deals lined up. Fast, aggressive, too perfect to be true. Camille checked his paperwork. The prices were off by a few hundred each and the delivery fees were missing. She walked to his desk. "Mr. Hensley, these forms need correction before I approve them." He didn't even look up. "It's handled. I've been doing this since you were in high school." "Then it should be easy to fix," she said, calm as ever. He slammed his pen down. "Why are you singling me out?" "Because you're our top seller," she replied, without missing a beat. "And if the top cuts corners, the rest follow. I can't allow that." The room went quiet. Salesmen pretended to type, but their ears were wide open. It was about principle. Still, the sting of being corrected in front of his peers burned deep. He gathered his papers, muttering under his breath, "You'll regret crossing me." Camille heard it. She didn't flinch. "I'll take that as motivation," she said softly, walking away. That evening, Rico caught up with Blake in the parking lot. "Man, what was that about? She wasn't even harsh." Blake leaned on his car, looking at the sunset. "You don't get it, kid. She's trying to change the game. And if she wins, guys like us are done." Rico frowned. Maybe the game needs to change. Blake didn't reply. He just got in his car and drove off, tires screeching, ego boiling. Meanwhile, Camille sat alone in her office, the lights dimmed. Her phone buzzed, a message from corporate. "Strong start. Keep your foot down. We trust your leadership." She exhaled, rubbing her temples. She didn't enjoy confrontation, but leadership wasn't about comfort. It was about courage. That night, as rain tapped against his window, Blake replayed the day in his head. The way she handled him. The way everyone looked at her instead of him. He poured himself a drink. He built his entire identity on being the best, the man no one could challenge. And now, this woman, calm, professional, deliberate, had done it without even raising her voice. He smirked bitterly. "Game on, Camille," he whispered to the empty room. "If you want to fight, you've got one." The next week began with rain. Thick gray clouds hung over the dealership, muting the sunlight, coating every car on the lot in a silver haze. Blake walked in late, as usual, his jacket soaked, his temper darker than the storm outside. Inside, everyone was already at their desks. Camille stood near the front glass window, clipboard in hand, checking the morning inventory. Her poise was effortless, professional. The kind of calm that made others straighten up without a word. "Morning, Mr. Hensley," she said with that same even tone. "You're 10 minutes late again." He smirked. "Yeah, traffic's bad when you're not the boss." Camille glanced at her watch, then at him. Traffic's bad for everyone, but accountability still counts. He rolled his eyes and walked past her, muttering, "You keep talking about accountability like it's magic." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her silence hit harder than any argument could. 2 p.m. By noon, the day took a turn. A high-profile client, a surgeon named Dr. Whitaker, arrived to pick up his new luxury SUV. It was a big sale, the kind of deal that made the quarterly report shine. Blake had handled it from start to finish, and he was proud of the result. But when Camille reviewed the paperwork, she noticed a small issue. The financing rate didn't match what the client was promised. A small mistake, but a costly one. She approached Blake's desk quietly. "Hey, quick note," she said. "You put the wrong APR here. The final number's off by about 600. He leaned back, smirking. "Relax. He's not gonna notice. He's a doctor, not an accountant." "That's not the point," Camille said. Voice steady. "We honor every digit we promise. Fix it before he arrives." He slammed his pen down. "You think I'm trying to scam him?" Camille took a slow breath. "I think you're rushing, and that can lead to mistakes. I'm just preventing one." For a second, the entire floor froze again. Rico looked up from his desk. The receptionist stopped typing. Even the rain seemed to pause against the glass. Then Dr. Whitaker entered, tall, polite, smiling. Blake's jaw clenched. He had no choice now. He fixed the paperwork, his pride burning like acid. After the handover, the doctor left satisfied, shaking Camille's hand with a "thank you for catching that." Blake watched from the side, the praise twisting deeper into his gut, under. That evening, after everyone had gone home, Camille stayed late again. The sound of soft jazz played from her office speakers as she reviewed the month's reports. Blake's numbers were still impressive, but his attitude was staining everything around it. He was charismatic, yes. Skilled, yes. But his ego was poisoning the team. As she closed her laptop, the door opened behind her. Blake stepped in, still in his soaked jacket, eyes sharp and restless. "Working late again?" he asked. "Someone has to make sure we're not sinking," she said, without looking up. He stepped closer. "You don't like me, do you?" She finally looked at him, calm, steady. "I don't dislike you, Blake. I dislike excuses." He laughed bitterly. "Excuses? I built this place while you were still learning how to sign your name. I've made this dealership millions. You walk in here, act like you know everything, and you think I'm the problem?" Camille closed her folder. "You're not the problem, Blake, but your pride might be." He stared at her, breathing hard, jaw tight. "You think you're better than me?" "No," she said simply. "I think you've forgotten how to be better." That silence between them stretched heavy, electric. For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. For the first time, he saw her not as a threat, but as someone who saw through him. He turned away, muttering, "You have no idea what it's like to carry this place." Camille spoke softly, but every word landed like stone. "Then maybe it's time you stop carrying it alone, okay? The shift begins." Over the next few days, things changed subtly. Blake still had his temper, still had his pride, but something in him began to shift. When Camille corrected him now, he didn't explode. He listened. Not for long, not fully, but he listened. He started watching how she dealt with customers, how she never raised her voice, how she could convince the toughest buyer without selling anything at all. And one morning, while he was watching her from across the showroom, Rico leaned in. "She's good, huh?" Blake didn't answer. He just nodded once. Then he muttered, almost to himself, "Too good." The storm returns. But just when it seemed peace might settle in, the universe had other plans. Friday afternoon, a client stormed into the dealership, furious, claiming his car hadn't been serviced as promised. The entire lobby went tense. Camille came forward immediately, calm and professional. "I understand, sir. Let's look into this right now." But Blake, trying to defend the dealership's image, jumped in first. "Hold on. I handled your sale personally, remember? You probably misunderstood the agreement." The man's eyes flared. "Misunderstood? I paid for premium service." "Sir, I'm sure." Camille cut him off gently. "Blake, let's step aside for a moment." He frowned, refusing to move. "I can handle this." Her voice stayed calm, but firm. "Not like this. Step aside." The client's wife filmed the scene on her phone. Perfect timing. Perfect scandal potential. Blake saw it, and his temper snapped. He raised his voice. "You're embarrassing the team. And you're embarrassing the brand." Camille shot back, her eyes locked on his. The silence after that felt like a thunderclap. Every employee stared. Every second felt longer than the last. Camille turned to the client. "Sir, I sincerely apologize. Let me personally fix this for you." Her calm broke the tension. The couple relaxed. The phone lowered. Crisis averted. Barely. Blake, however, walked straight out the back door, his pride bleeding out like a wound. The question. That night, Blake sat in his car, rain tapping against the windshield again. He thought about her words, her composure, the way she never lost control. Even when he tried to break it, for the first time in his career, he wasn't sure if he wanted to win against her or win her respect. He didn't know it yet, but that single question, "What if she's right?" was about to change everything that came next. The next morning, the dealership was buzzing again, but something felt different. People whispered in softer tones, cautious, watching both Blake and Camille from the corners of their eyes. The argument from the day before hadn't gone unnoticed. It had spread quietly, from the sales floor to the service bays, and everyone was wondering what would happen next. Blake arrived early for once. No sunglasses, no coffee, no smirk. He walked straight to his desk and began organizing paperwork, something he rarely did himself. Rico noticed it first, glancing up from across the room with confusion. The rest of the team followed his lead, pretending to work, but watching every move he made. Camille walked in 10 minutes later, holding a tablet and her usual calm expression. She looked at Blake, then at the staff. No greeting, no announcement, just a silent acknowledgement. Then she went straight to her office. For most of the morning, they didn't speak. Camille handled clients, reviewed files, made calls. Blake kept to himself, focused and quiet. The dealership moved like a clock again, everyone afraid to make a sound that might spark another confrontation. Around noon, the regional director, Greg Turner, showed up unexpectedly. He was tall, polished, always smiling. The kind of man who pretended tension didn't exist. But everyone knew why he was there. Corporate had heard about the incident. Greg gathered them all in the conference room. His voice was cheerful, but the air was heavy. "Team," he began, "I've been hearing great numbers lately. Strong quarter, excellent retention, customer satisfaction climbing. That's what we like to see." He paused, smiling in Blake's direction. "But I've also heard about a disagreement." The silence deepened. Blake crossed his arms. Camille stayed still. "We can't afford to have our best people working against each other. Greg continued. This dealership only wins if you two are on the same side. Camille spoke first, calm and measured. I agree. There was a misunderstanding. It won't happen again. Greg nodded, satisfied. Good. That's leadership. He turned to Blake. And you, my man? Blake looked at the table for a long moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, he said, She's right. I lost my temper. Won't happen again. Greg grinned, clapping his hands. That's what I like to hear. You two could be unstoppable together. Then he left, as quickly as he'd arrived. The room slowly emptied. Camille stayed back, collecting her notes. When Blake approached, she didn't look up. You didn't have to say that, she murmured. Say what? He asked quietly. That you lost your temper. You could have blamed me. He shrugged. I've done enough of that already. It was the first real truce between them. No sharp words, no hidden competition. Just two people who'd finally stopped pretending they weren't human. Later that day, Camille walked through the service bay with a clipboard, checking on delayed orders. Blake followed, watching how she spoke to the mechanics. Respectful, kind, never condescending. One of the older workers, Frank, grinned at her. You know, ma'am, we haven't had a manager who actually listens since the 90s. Camille laughed softly. Maybe that's why things stopped working in the 90s. Even Blake smiled. It was the first time in weeks he'd seen her laugh, and it wasn't rehearsed. It was real. For the first time, he saw her not as competition, but as a leader. When she turned and noticed him watching, she raised an eyebrow. Something on your mind? He shook his head. Just realizing maybe I've been doing this wrong. She tilted her head, curious. How so? He hesitated. All these years, I thought being the best meant being untouchable, winning every argument, owning every deal. But watching you, you make people want to win with you, not against you. Camille didn't say anything right away. Her expression softened, just slightly. That's the only kind of winning that lasts. Her words lingered in his mind long after she'd walked away. By evening, a storm rolled in, again. The kind of heavy rain that made the parking lot shimmer like glass. Camille was still at her desk when the power flickered. The lights dimmed, then steadied. Most of the staff had already left. Only Blake remained, sitting at his desk, finishing a late contract. He stood up, walked to her office doorway, and knocked lightly. You planning to sleep here tonight? He asked. She looked up with a faint smile. Maybe. You? He chuckled. No, just making sure you don't drown in reports. Camille leaned back. I don't drown. I swim through them. He smirked, leaning against the doorframe. Of course you do. For a few quiet seconds, they just looked at each other, not as rivals, not as boss and employee, but as two people who finally understood what the other carried. She saw the pressure behind his arrogance. He saw the strength behind her calm. Blake, she said softly, you've got potential for something bigger than this place. But not if you let your ego keep driving. He nodded slowly. Maybe I'm finally letting it park. She laughed quietly. That's progress. When he left the office that night, the storm had passed. The parking lot was silent, washed clean. He stood there under the dim light, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Respect. Not for himself, but for someone else. Inside, Camille turned off her desk lamp, staring out the window at his car as it pulled away. A small smile formed on her lips. For the first time, she believed that change was possible. Not just for the dealership, but for him too. The next morning, Blake arrived before sunrise. He brought coffee, 2 cups, and set one on her desk before she even walked in. When she arrived, she looked at it, surprised, then at him. Even the staff joked more. Something had shifted, something small but powerful. By sunset, the dealership looked alive again, and for the first time since Camille's arrival, Blake didn't feel like he was losing something. He felt like he was part of something bigger, something that might actually matter. That night, as he locked up, he glanced at the wall of photos behind the glass. His picture was still there, top salesman, year after year. But he didn't stop to admire it. He just smiled faintly, turned off the lights, and walked out into the quiet night, ready for whatever came next. The next morning brought soft sunlight and the smell of freshly brewed coffee drifting through the showroom. For the first time in months, the energy inside Ridgeview Motors felt calm, steady, almost warm. Employees greeted each other with real smiles instead of nervous glances. Phones rang, printers hummed, and for once, Blake wasn't late. He walked in wearing a dark blazer, holding 2 coffees again. He handed one to Camille with a quiet, "Good morning." She looked at him, surprised but amused. "You're making a habit of this," she said. He shrugged lightly. "You started making me a better salesman. It's only fair I return the favor." Her smile was small but genuine. "You're learning fast." That morning, a corporate email arrived announcing a major regional conference. Camille had been chosen to represent Ridgeview Motors as the keynote speaker, a huge honor. The message spread through the dealership like wildfire. People congratulated her, one after another. Rico clapped his hands. "About time someone recognized you." But not everyone was happy. In the corner of the room, Blake stared at the announcement on his screen, his emotions tangled. Pride? Yes. But also something else. A strange emptiness he couldn't explain. For years, he had been the one on stage, the face of the dealership. Now it was her. And oddly, he wasn't angry. He was lost. Later that day, Camille stopped by his desk. "Big news, huh?" she said softly. He nodded, pretending to be focused on his computer. "Yeah, congratulations." She studied him for a moment. "You don't look happy about it." He looked up. "I'm fine, just busy." Camille leaned against the desk. "You know, for someone who used to think he was invincible, you're really bad at hiding your feelings." He laughed under his breath. "Maybe I'm just getting old." "No," she said gently. "You're getting honest." That line stayed with him all day. Honest. He couldn't remember the last time he had been that. As evening came, Camille worked late again, rehearsing her speech for the conference. The office was quiet, the lights dim. Blake was about to leave when he noticed her pacing behind the glass, reading notes out loud. He hesitated, then walked back inside. She didn't notice him at first. "Stronger relationships, integrity, and teamwork are the foundation of success," she read, frowning. "No, that sounds too stiff." He smiled. "You sound like a politician." Camille looked up startled, then laughed. "I didn't hear you come in." "Didn't mean to interrupt," he said, leaning on the doorframe. "Maybe I need the interruption," she admitted. "This speech feels too polished, too perfect, like it's missing something human." Blake thought for a moment. "Maybe it's missing you." She raised an eyebrow. "Me?" "Yeah," he said. "When you talk, you always sound calm and confident. But when you mean something, you sound real. That's what people listen to. Not the numbers, not the structure, just you." Camille stared at him quietly for a few seconds, her expression softening. "You've changed." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I finally started listening." For a while, neither of them spoke. The sound of rain began to fall again outside, the same rhythm that seemed to follow every turning point between them. She sat down, pushing the papers aside. "You know," she said quietly, "when I first got here, I thought you were impossible." "I was," he said honestly. She smiled. "You still are, just less impossible now." He laughed. I'll take that as progress. When she finally left that night, her speech was ready, not perfect, but true. Blake stayed behind, watching her taillights disappear into the rain. Something in him felt lighter and heavier at the same time. The next morning, Camille left for the conference. The dealership buzzed with excitement. Everyone wanted to know how it would go. Blake promised the team he'd keep things running smoothly while she was away. He threw himself into work, greeting customers, mentoring new hires, checking every report twice. By Friday, the place ran like clockwork. That night, after closing, he sat in Camille's office, staring at her nameplate on the desk. He'd never realized how much her presence filled this space, not just physically, but in the way she made everyone better. He whispered to the empty room, "You did it, Camille. You actually changed this place." The following afternoon, the team gathered in the break room to watch the live stream of her speech. The screen flickered to life, showing her standing on a sleek stage under bright lights. She looked confident, calm, radiant. Her voice came through the speakers, clear and strong. "When I first stepped into my new role, I walked into a room full of talent, but also full of pride, fear, and old habits. I didn't come to replace anyone. I came to remind them what teamwork looks like." Everyone leaned forward, listening. Blake felt his chest tighten. Her words hit deeper than he expected. "I learned," she continued, "that leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about being the calmest one when everyone else is losing theirs. It's about listening, truly listening, even when you don't like what you hear." The audience applauded softly. Camille smiled. "And sometimes," she added, her tone softening, "you meet people who challenge you, people who make you better just by fighting you. To them, I say, thank you." Blake froze. For a moment, he forgot to breathe. The team clapped in the break room, proud and inspired. Rico turned to him. "She's talking about you, man." Blake smiled faintly, but said nothing. He just stared at the screen, where Camille's calm eyes met the crowd with quiet power. When the broadcast ended, everyone cheered. Blake stayed behind, watching the replay on his phone. Her final words echoed in his mind. "Thank you." That night, when Camille returned, she found a note on her desk, simple, written in Blake's handwriting. "You were right. Listening changes everything. B." She smiled as she read it, folding the paper carefully and placing it in her drawer. For the first time since she'd arrived at Ridgeview Motors, she didn't feel like she was fighting alone. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky was clear. And somewhere in that quiet, a new kind of respect, one built on honesty and growth, had finally taken root. The following week, the dealership was brighter than ever. The tension that once haunted every corner had been replaced by something softer. Cooperation, quiet respect, and laughter that didn't sound forced. Camille's speech had gone viral within the company. Headquarters praised Ridgeview Motors as a model of modern leadership. Everyone was proud. Everyone, including Blake. He had changed more than anyone could have imagined. His desk was neat. His tone was calm. He listened before speaking. And people noticed. Even the customers felt it. The man who once sold through charm and pressure, now sold through honesty and patience. Camille noticed too. She saw it in how he helped new hires, how he smiled at clients without arrogance, how he sometimes caught her eye across the showroom with a look that said, "You were right." One Thursday morning, corporate sent an email inviting both of them to a leadership retreat, a 2-day event for top performers. Camille was listed as a speaker again. Blake, as a special guest. She found him in the lounge, reading the message. "Looks like we're a package deal now," she said lightly. He smirked. "Guess you're stuck with me." "Or you're stuck with me," she replied. That exchange made the team laugh. It was a simple moment, but it carried the weight of months of growth, conflict, and forgiveness. The retreat was scheduled for the following weekend in a lakeside resort 2 hours away. Blake offered to drive, insisting it would be easier that way. Camille hesitated for a moment, then agreed. Saturday morning came clear and cool. When she stepped out of her house, Blake was already waiting in a black SUV, dressed in a casual blazer, coffee in hand. He opened the passenger door for her without saying a word. The road stretched quiet and long, lined with tall pine trees and morning mist. For the first half hour, they barely spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was peaceful. Eventually, Camille broke it. "You've been quiet today," she said softly. "Just thinking," he replied. "About what?" He glanced at her, then back at the road. "About how much has changed, about how much I've changed." She smiled faintly. "Change usually hurts before it helps." He nodded. "You were right about that. You know, I used to think leadership meant being untouchable. Now I get it. It's the opposite." Her eyes softened. "That's the best thing you've ever said." They arrived at the resort around noon. The lake shimmered under the sun, surrounded by green hills. The atmosphere was calm, a perfect escape from the dealership's noise. Inside the conference hall, executives from different regions mingled, laughing, shaking hands. Camille was confident as always, but this time Blake wasn't her rival. He was her quiet support, standing beside her when she spoke, introducing her to colleagues, backing her up with small nods and quiet smiles. When she took the stage to give her session, Blake sat in the front row, listening with genuine admiration. Her words flowed effortlessly, full of warmth and conviction. She spoke about rebuilding trust, about humility, about turning conflict into growth. And when she said, "Sometimes the hardest person to lead is yourself," her eyes found Blake's, just for a moment. He smiled back. After her talk ended, the room erupted in applause. People surrounded her afterward, offering congratulations. Blake waited off to the side, watching her glow under the praise. He wasn't jealous this time. He was proud. That evening, as the conference wrapped up, the organizers hosted a dinner by the lake. Candles flickered in the breeze, reflecting off the calm water. Camille and Blake sat together at a small table, away from the crowd. She raised her glass lightly. "To change," she said. He clinked his against hers. "To survival." They laughed. After a long pause, she looked at him and said softly, "You know, when I first met you, I almost asked to be transferred." He chuckled. "I don't blame you. I'm glad I didn't," she continued. "If I had, we both would have stayed the same." He looked at her for a long time, his expression serious now. "You made me face parts of myself I didn't want to see. I used to think you were just trying to control me. Now I get it. You were trying to save me from myself." The air between them went still. She didn't respond right away. Her eyes glistened softly under the candlelight. "Sometimes we meet people for a reason," she said finally. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, sometimes we meet the right person at the wrong time." That line hung in the air, delicate and heavy at the same time. Neither of them spoke after that. The night stretched around them, the sound of crickets, the gentle ripple of the water, the flicker of light across their faces. Later, when the crowd dispersed, they walked along the lake path together. The air was cool and quiet. The moon reflected perfectly on the surface of the water. Camille stopped near the edge, folding her arms against the chill. "It's peaceful here," she whispered. Blake stood beside her. Yeah, make you wonder why we spend so much time fighting storms when there's this kind of calm waiting. She turned to him. Maybe because the storms teach us what the calm really means. He smiled. You and your wisdom again. Someone has to balance your ego, she said playfully. He laughed, but his eyes lingered on her, the calm, the grace, the strength that had humbled him. You ever think about what's next? He asked quietly. For the dealership? For you, he said. She thought for a moment. I don't know, maybe someday, my own branch, maybe training new leaders. He nodded. You'd be great at that. What about you? She asked softly. He looked at the water, his reflection trembling in the light. I used to think I wanted power. Now I just want peace. Camille smiled faintly. That's how you know you've grown. They stood in silence again, the soft hum of night surrounding them. Then she turned to leave, whispering, Good night, Blake. He watched her walk away, her silhouette fading into the shadows. For the first time, he didn't feel the need to win. He just felt grateful, for her, for change, for second chances. When he returned to his cabin, he looked out the window one last time. The moon hung low, glowing over the lake. And deep down, he knew something had shifted permanently. The man who once saw leadership as a battlefield had learned something far greater. That sometimes, the real victory is learning to stand beside someone instead of against them. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, slept without the weight of his pride. Monday morning came quiet and soft, the kind of dawn that carried calm instead of chaos. The air was cool, the sky washed in pale orange light. At Ridgeview Motors, the day began slowly, but something felt renewed, as if the place itself had exhaled after holding its breath for too long. Camille arrived early, her posture calm, her face serene. She walked across the showroom, greeting the cleaning staff, checking displays, humming quietly to herself. She looked around the dealership that had once felt divided, broken, unfixable. Now it stood unified, polished, alive. Blake arrived not long after, dressed simply in a dark shirt and slacks, a coffee in hand. He smiled when he saw her, the kind of genuine, easy smile that needed no words. Morning, he said softly. Morning, she replied. The quiet between them wasn't tense anymore. It was steady, an unspoken respect, built through conflict, humility, and change. A few hours later, the regional director, Greg Turner, stopped by again. He strode in with his signature grin, clapping his hands. Well, if it isn't the dream team, he said. I just got off the call with corporate. Camille, your speech was the talk of the conference. They're thinking of promoting you to regional operations lead. Camille blinked. Regional? She repeated softly. Greg nodded. It's not official yet, but it's on the table. They were impressed, really impressed. The room filled with congratulations. The staff clapped, Rico whistled, everyone beamed. But Camille's eyes drifted toward Blake. He was smiling, not forced, not jealous, just proud. She gave a small nod of gratitude, and he nodded back, their silent language now second nature. When the excitement faded, she stepped into her office to breathe. Blake knocked lightly on the glass door before stepping in. So, he said, leaning casually on the frame. Regional operations lead, huh? You're about to trade us for a bigger empire. Camille laughed softly. It's just a possibility. Nothing's confirmed. He smiled. You deserve it. Every bit of it. She met his gaze for a moment, something unspoken passing between them. Gratitude, warmth, maybe even something deeper. You helped make it happen, she said quietly. He chuckled. Pretty sure I almost ruined it, remember? Maybe at first, she said with a teasing smile. But you turned it around. You proved people can change. And that matters more than you think. For a few seconds, the air between them grew heavier, not uncomfortable, but charged with meaning. Then Camille turned her attention to a stack of reports. If I do get promoted, someone's going to have to take over this branch, she said. Blake raised an eyebrow. You suggesting I apply? She didn't look up. I'm not suggesting anything, just thinking out loud. He smiled faintly, though his chest tightened with a strange mix of pride and fear. The idea of her leaving, of walking into this place without hearing her voice, without seeing her calm presence, felt heavier than he wanted to admit. That night, after everyone had gone, Camille stayed behind, sitting in her office with the lights low. The city outside was quiet. The dealership still. She scrolled through her emails, congratulations, opportunities, offers. And then, in the middle of it all, one simple message from Blake. If you do take that job, just know this place will never be the same. But I'll make sure it stays the kind of place you'd still be proud to walk into. Now those same lights gleamed off smiling faces and clinking coffee cups. He just stood near the back, hands in pockets, smiling quietly. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Camille walked over to him. I guess this is it, she said. He nodded. You'll be incredible, wherever you go. Promise me you'll keep this place running the right way, she said. I promise, he replied softly. The Camille way. She laughed. The team way. For a moment, neither moved. Then she reached out and hugged him. Brief, warm. Unexpected. He froze for a second, then hugged her back, the kind of embrace that said everything words couldn't. Gratitude, respect, closure. When she pulled away, her eyes shimmered faintly. Take care of them, Blake. I will, he said. Take care of yourself. She nodded, gave him one last smile, and walked out through the glass doors. The sun outside caught her reflection as she left, calm, steady, confident. The same way she had arrived, but everything about her presence now meant something different. Blake stood there long after she was gone. The showroom felt bigger, quieter, lonelier. He walked to her office, looked at the empty desk, the neat shelves, the framed quote on the wall that read, Integrity is doing the right thing, even when no one is watching. He smiled faintly, whispering to the empty room, Guess you left your mark, Camille. Weeks passed. The dealership thrived under his care. The team worked like a unit, stronger than ever. Blake wasn't just selling cars anymore. He was leading people, guiding them with the same calm tone Camille had taught him. He'd stopped chasing numbers and started chasing trust. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the windows, Blake found himself staring at the same reflection she once had. For the first time in years, he didn't see arrogance or fear looking back. He saw purpose. He saw growth. And somewhere deep inside, he felt peace. The kind that didn't come from winning, but from finally learning how to live right. He turned off the lights, grabbed his keys, and stepped out into the quiet night. The air was cool, soft, filled with the hum of distant city lights. He looked up at the sky and whispered, Thank you. Not to anyone in particular. Maybe to her. Maybe to the lesson. Maybe to the man he used to be. Then he walked to his car, the doors locking behind him, and drove off down the long road lined with streetlights. Each one glowing like a reminder that sometimes the hardest endings lead to the truest beginnings. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful life lessons and emotional stories that inspire change. Turn on the bell icon so you never miss what's next. Until then, Stay kind, stay strong, and remember, growth always begins with honesty.